Stage 2 kicks off on Thursday with the Philadelphia Fusion taking on the New York Excelsior. But just before I bring you my preview and predictions for it, I think I should revisit my power rankings from the end of last stage, take into account what happened in the playoffs, as well as how I think the off-season balance changes have changed the strength of some of the sides. Beginning as usual at the bottom, with the Florida Mayhem at 20 unchanged, the LA Valiant at 19 down 1, the Washington Justice up 1 to 18, and the Hangzhou Spark and Houston Outlaws remain unmoved at 17 and 16 respectively. Nothing in what could be the new meta really makes any major improvements to these teams in my eyes. Yes, the Junkrat and other DPS buffs have the potential for the Spark and Outlaws to utilise, but it still appears that Goats will be the preferred composition in most situations. So these teams will need to show us their potential in the opening weeks if they want to move out of my bottom 5. Florida remains unsurprisingly at the bottom, unlike their academy team that is flourishing at the moment, perhaps a little hint there for their management. The only change here comes with the Justice and Valiant, as I've swapped their places. Washington have brought on Ark from New York, who should give this team some needed help in leadership and experience, but they still remain with plenty of other issues. The Valiant, meanwhile, still haven't found their new coach, had rumoured trades fall through, and now enter a meta but I actually think suits them less, hence the drop. The next two teams are in a strange place, and they have themselves swapped places from last time, so I now have the Paris Eternal at 15, the London Spitfire at 14. Both of these teams really fell off towards the end of the last stage, despite both having high expectations at the beginning of the season. Paris drops again, as I feel that the new meta will really not suit the team at all, as we begin to slowly ebb away from the GOATS meta. There's nothing to suggest their freefall at the end of last stage won't continue into this one. London also struggled at the latter end of last stage, having thrown away a decent chance of making the playoffs. Yet given my expectation that Winston's role in this meta will increase, which will massively help Gesture, I think this team could again rise if they can find their mid-stage mojo we saw a month ago. After this, the Shanghai Dragons and Guangzhou Charge still remain at 13 and 12. Both sides hold an enormous amount of talent in their squads that I feel could really start to break out in this new meta. But in order to rise up my rankings, they'll need to show in the coming weeks that they are moving away from their biggest weakness, their inconsistency. Both sides have great levels of performance one week, but then disappear the next, and with the teams now having been together for a few months and the first stage, there are no more excuses left for being uncoordinated and not gelling as a team. If their issues are addressed, both of these sides could really make solid pushes towards playoffs next stage. At 11 is the Dallas Fuel down 2, behind the Atlanta Reign falling 3 positions to 10. The Chengdu Hunters enter the top 10, moving up twice to 9, and the Boston Uprising remain at 8. Dallas threw away a very good chance to make the playoffs last stage, and will be looking once again to be a challenger, with the new meta perhaps fitting the many DPS players that they have in their squad. They fall twice however, due to the Chengdu Hunters and the Seoul Dynasty rising above them, and I'll get on to those two teams in a minute. Atlanta is the biggest faller in this week's rankings. With Defiant now retiring, they're only left with Nala and Erster at the DPS position, who I'm sure will be able to step up in his absence, though it does leave the side without many options. This is only part of the issue, with the roster as a whole quite thin, even with the signing of Funny Astro as a two-way player. But crucially, the level of performance at the end of last stage does concern me, as I fear it may translate itself into this new stage, as the team showed itself to be very emotional, could be affected both positively and negatively by this on stage. Chengdu once again find themselves rising, and this is mainly down to the changes in the meta, with Hammond getting a buff alongside other DPS options, as well as some of the other balance changes. This meta looks to be tailor-made for a side carrying both a huge amount of momentum and fan support into this new stage, and they'll need to show the same level of performances again. Lastly, Boston remain at 8, having been comfortably eliminated by Vancouver in the playoffs. That's not to say that the same didn't happen to Seoul, but that series did seem to be a little more competitive than the Uprisings. I'm not too sure if the Uprising will perform too well during this stage, but rather than doubt them and be proved wrong again, I'll leave them where they are and go into the next few weeks from there. The next 4 teams that I've bracketed together all have a load of talent and should once again be vying for a playoff spot, as as they sit just below my top 3. Moving up the most of any of the teams this week, 3 times, it's the Seoul Dynasty at 7. The LA Gladiators remain at 6, whilst Toronto Defiant and Philadelphia Fusion trade places, now at 5 and 4. Seoul sent shockwaves and ruined most playoff brackets as they defeated the New York Excelsior in the first round of the playoffs a couple of weeks ago. In this series, they utilised their 2 teams in about 4 different playstyles in a show of flexibility and adaptability that seemed to catch the Excelsior off guard as they pulled off the upset. They could not repeat this level of performance against Vancouver, leading to their exit, so moving forward they'll need to utilise this flexible strength again if they wish to rise, with a newfound hope in the team, or risk once again falling under the pressure of expectation. The Gladiators remain here based on their end of season run, but if they can continue into this stage, alongside the balance changes that I think play into their advantage, will set this team up as a dark horse playoff candidate moving forward. Fusion swapped places with Toronto for firstly making it deeper in the playoffs, more importantly because I feel like this meta really suits Philadelphia, specifically Carpe, far more than the Defiant. Both of these teams had relatively comfortable schedules in Stage 1, so will need to be at the top of their game as Stage 2 begins to avoid a quick and sudden descent if their quality is exposed. Finally, we have the top 3, which shouldn't be too much of a surprise to anyone, with the Vancouver Titans and San Francisco Shock both moving up 1 position each to 1 and 2, as the New York Excelsior dropped 2 places to 3. Starting with New York, this side really ruined their appearance with their shock playoff loss for Seoul Dynasty. They are still undoubtedly a really strong side, but they just can't seem to shake off the LW Blue choking demons. So until they can prove otherwise, there's no solid reason for having them above the top 2 teams. Vancouver, like in the playoff final, edges out the crown ahead of the Shock. Both of these squads have amazing talent and depth that showed itself in Stage 1. They seem to be guaranteed to the playoff again, as we enter a meta that arguably once more suits both sides a lot. So unless one of them slips up in the next couple of weeks, I'm expecting to see these 2 sides remain at the top for quite a while. With that, we've reached the end of my pre-Stage 2 power rankings, and I hope you enjoyed. Remember to check back at a similar time each week as I update these rankings throughout Stage 2 and the rest of the season. As I mentioned in yesterday's video, you can expect my preview and predictions video for Stage 2 to be out tomorrow. So until then, please like and subscribe if you enjoyed for this continuing Overwatch League content.